Welcome to our Thursday second hour. Back a few months ago when Apple announced the feature set of the iPhone 15 and especially the Pro versions, it kind of signaled an acceleration of those devices in the video production sphere. The key features, like the switch from a Lightning to USB-C port on the brand new iPhones at the time, expanded storage options for shooting larger video files. Another kind of shock was when Apple elected to announce the first device to get Apple's newest silicon chipset, the new M4 processors, wasn't going to be a desktop or laptop, but no, an iPad. Who saw that coming? During the WWDC keynote, a big announcement was new complex mobile multicam editing workflows built around that new M4 iPad Pro, running Final Cut Pro for the iPad, which was also announced. All of this indicates, at least at Apple, mobile video production is still a big target for them. And the demo showed a way to connect multiple iPhone Pros into a live switch production system using that iPad, using instant proxy files over Wi-Fi to do near-instant cutting and editing. Full-res files transferred from the phone cameras to the iPod afterwards and using proxies before that. So all this kind of indicates that Apple has been looking at video production, particularly desktop video production. And there was another little indication just recently, the cherry on top, Final Cut Camera was added to the mix. That's kind of a rebuilding, something like what people have been using from Blackmagic and others, a more integrated camera approach that you could load up as an app into your phone that fed this kind of new system. So all of that means there's a lot of action happening in iPhone video recording and production. We're going to talk about that today. What it does, what it doesn't do, what it's best suited for, and the whole thing. What does this mean for different levels of production? I am excited because Alex has been using this system for a while, and I'm sure he'll have thoughts as he's been exploring this. But we wanted to generally open this up for everybody to ask questions about why did they do this, what's coming, and Alex, what have your experiences been?
Yeah, so far, I mean, I think that the big thing that we wanted to do is make sure that our viewers and members really understood the opportunities that are available and also the limitations that are there right now. So one of the things to look at is that you have, I mean, at this point, you have Apple shooting its own keynote. So I think that one of the things that's really important is Apple dog fooding their own phone. So they're not just saying people should use this and you could use it on a big event. They're using it on big events. And I think you see some of the limitations there. I mean, sometimes the black levels and a lot of other things that aren't quite as good as they probably would be on an Airy, which is I think what they were shooting with before. so I think that it's
a little different.
It's so the thing is that so I think that it's really powerful. What I will say is that I feel like Apple did catch a lot of people off guard, other phone manufacturers, in the sense that I really feel like they jumped about 2 or 3 versions in 1 year. So they suddenly moved to an entirely different delivery, level. And there's a couple of things that happened. Number one is, it's not like they just did it all in 1 year, but the ability to record ProRes is a big deal. Like being able to record ProRes means that you're now able to record in a grown-up format. It's called adulting. So until when you're recording in little H.264s or all the weird formats that a lot of the Android stuff records in, it becomes really hard to deal with that in post. And so there's all these weird little formats, and the bottom line is that there are 2 formats that you should record in, and that's DNX and ProRes. If you're, so those are the 2 formats. If you're recording, those are the 2 formats, other than RAW maybe. But those, if you're doing something, those are the 2 major formats that you want to be able to support. If you can't support them, then you can't really use it in production. It also means that they started recording in 10-bit. So the iPhone now records in 10-bit. And that means that we're getting the potential for HDR. We're getting much better, much deeper imagery. We can record Apple ProRes HQ on a phone, which is kind of amazing. And then, what was missing when it first came out, of course, is a good phone app. But of course, the Blackmagic app, and which we'll try to show a little bit later. But the Blackmagic app allowed us to then be able to now have all the tools that we want. I mean, there are rudimentary tools in the Apple Photos, in Apple's own photo app, but you can't really serious in there, except for the only thing that we use in that is spatial, which is also another added feature to what the iPhone can do, which is I'm going to be using more and more all summer as we start to stream spatially. And so there's a lot of things to it, but this phone is very different from what we've seen in the past, and I think that it will continue to be different. And the reason that I think it's so important is because we can do you can do pickup shots, and years ago I was doing pickup shots here and there for a live show, like, oh, I got to insert an open, or I got to insert a little thing of the CEO walking into the thing. We don't have a camera for that, and we would take our iPhone out and shoot it and be okay. At this point, I don't know if you'd be able to tell the difference, when we capture it, and that's the difference that's there. The other thing is it's very, you're carrying it with you all the time. I now know that I can switch gears and decide I really want to capture this footage exactly the way I want to capture it, and I can switch gears with a phone that's in my pocket wherever I am in the world without having to pull out a big camera to make that actually happen. Now, the other things in addition to the sensor that I think are important to remember are the USB-C is as big of a deal as the sensor changes and the record changes that Apple made. The problem you really had before the iPhone 15 is the transfer speed out of the phone. So, and just connectivity in general. So there wasn't enough. That little lightning connector was never going to be enough. I know people think that the EU somehow forced Apple to do a USB-C, but it was the trajectory was obvious. There was no way to go where they wanted to go with the phone without going to USB-C. I think what Apple did is just delayed the EU long enough for them to put it into the pipeline that they already had, because it takes years to develop a new port. So you got to understand that, like when we were saying, oh, they just did this in the last 6 months. The iPhone 15 was finished on the table 2 or 3 years ago. So it's not new. At least 2 or 3 years ago, as far as how they figured out what they were going to do there. So. But by doing that, we can now attach all kinds of things to it. So external drives, it now writes to the external drive seamlessly. But also, the iPhone. The thing to know is like the Blackmagic Camera app will take up to 4 channels of audio. And so if you have and there's a couple different ways to bring that audio in, but you can actually deliver 4 channels of audio to the Blackmagic Camera effectively to make that actually work. And so but you can do things like, and you could do this before, but it was pretty messy, which is that you can do things like put and I'll try to find a photo here to show you real quickly while other people are talking, but you can put a Mixpre 3 underneath, rig it up and then rig it into your phone. And then you've got, regular IO. And we've been doing some version of that for maybe a decade, but it's so much easier with a USB-C connection than it was before. So with all of these tools starting to build up, and because the infrastructure is now building up around the phone, it's making it a lot easier to do more professional work. The one thing the caveat I want to lay out here is this a replacement for a large video camera? No, it's not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's better than an Arri or a Venice or even a Blackmagic 6K. These are all going to produce better content, objectively better content than your phone. So if any reasonable Super 35 sensor with a reasonable amount of IO and above, you're probably going to get a better solution. But is it going to be as portable? No. Is it going to be as, and the other thing is that in some cases, like I do think that with this phone, it becomes very, very difficult to justify any of these little pocket phones. I know they've become like a thing recently. People are talking about kids wanting to have the little pocket phones that they can put in their thing. It's not a phone or whatever. I don't know. But I think that I wouldn't want to be a manufacturer of, and most of those have died away, but there's really Super 35 or APS and above are things that are definitely going to be better than your phone. But I find myself as someone who shoots I shoot all of my professional work typically with Blackmagic, Sony, and Aries. Those are the 3 brands that I use the most for my professional work. And for all the other things I shoot, I almost all shoot with my iPhone. And so and I find myself capturing more and more footage that way and experimenting with it. So I think that there's I think that there's an incredible opportunity for what we're doing for us to, to take advantage of, and you could produce, things where I think that the big markets are is A, filling in little things here and there, B, the other place that I think that it really works is education and corporate. There's lots of educational and corporate communication that you can very easily use the iPhone for to capture a lot of the footage that you're trying to do, that you're trying to produce. And I think it's great, just an incredible tool to make that actually work. So those are some of the things to think about. Again, it's not the replacement for your film camera, but it's also the replacement for a lot of things that you would normally do, and it just does make it a lot easier to produce those. The last thing I'll say before we open up to questions is, or Bill opens up to questions unless he has some other things to say, but the spatial video is something that's pretty interesting. I would highly recommend going to streamvoodoo.com/spatial and get on the list. Because we won't be able to open the list all at one time. But I'm going to be doing a bunch of spatial tests. So that's the other thing that the phone does right now is it's able to capture spatial video. That's stereo, left eye, right eye, spatial video right now. You can hit capture and it'll just capture it. What StreamVoodoo has worked on and what I've been testing with them is the ability to stream from the phone. So literally I open up my phone, I hit go, and it's streaming to a headset. And so if you have an Apple Vision Pro, you can open it up and you'll see the spatial stream that I'm streaming, and there's almost no friction in between it. And so I think that's another interesting piece of that puzzle. And again, we're talking about the iPhone 15. We expect the iPhone 16 to get better than the iPhone 15. I'm expecting probably 4K spatial, potentially higher frame rates. I don't know why they would go much higher resolution, but maybe higher frame rates. Those types of things are probably on their way. So I think that it's exciting, and I think that it's just never been better to have a phone, to do this stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to support a lot of that. And this is just my story. I came out of original Handycam stuff. I wasn't a video guy. I worked around television, mostly doing voiceover and stuff like that, and TV stations and things like that. But the cameras at the time to do professional video were $50,000 plus, and I just couldn't afford those. When the original Handycams came out, I thought, this will be fun. And I got one with an income tax refund once, and I started playing around, and I just fell in love with shooting. I mean, I literally fell in love with it. I was having so much fun, and some of my clients started asking me for footage. The transition from those Handycams into eventually shoulder mount rigs and bigger cameras to get better things, and particularly to get better audio recording capabilities. I watched this whole transition to more and more expense, and then suddenly when the DV era hit, those smaller cameras started looking better and better. And the reason I'm telling you this is because when I got to my first serious iPhone with a decent camera, I started looking at blacks, and I started looking to how easy it was, and I started realizing, this is better than a lot of those bigger cameras I had the generation before. The blacks held better, the light gathering was superior. They were putting a lot of money into these phone camera systems, and I'll never forget the first time I went out to an actual shoot, and it was an accident that I had nothing but my iPhone with me, so I thought I'll just shoot it on this, not very many expectations. But when I came back and started editing the footage, I was pleasantly surprised at that. It actually looked good enough to the point where a corporate client said, this is fine, let's just do the piece with this, and next time we'll do it with the other camera. We'll go back and reshoot it if we need to. We never did because it looked good enough. Then I had a circumstance where I had my Blackmagic 6K camera out, and I was planning on shooting a parade kind of event that one of my clients was sponsoring, and it was just for an internal corporate video. I had that big rig on my shoulder, and I realized that if I just used my iPhone on a monopod, I would suddenly be much more flexible in the kinds of shot I could get. So I literally left the 6K in the car the whole time, and I just thought, I'm going to try it. And I shot this. It turned out to be one of our more successful videos. The corporate people and the audience that watched it just loved what we did because I was freed. I could go way up high to get near the banners with the monopod. I could switch it around and get down low to follow a dog as he went through the crowd. Those kind of things that are very difficult, and you have to do a lot of planning in order to execute with a 8 or 10-pound camera became utterly simple with a phone on the end of a monopod. And it started me thinking differently about how I would go about shooting things. And so that was the first of about maybe 10 projects I've shot since then, particularly on my iPhone. And it just gets more fun every time I go out. So there's something kind of psychological about I'm free from the big production environment. I'll still do that. I mean, if I have a shoot with executives, I'm not going to just set up my iPhone. But there's a lot more options for different kinds of aesthetic looks, and I find myself freer to get more interesting shots because it doesn't hurt to try it and see if it works out. Alexander, you had some thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Apple's a perfect example. They have this idyllic view of like, this is what you can do with the camera hardware. I mean, it's amazing that we can now shoot in log, right? But other than content creators and maybe some corporate stuff, I'm just curious, and maybe I'll throw it to Alex, but I haven't really seen a lot of or heard of examples of people actually using the iPhone 15 Pro to do extra footage in commercials or movies or anything big other than just more sort of amateur consumer grade stuff. So other than the Apple commercial, have you heard of any?
Or the entire Apple keynote.
Yeah.
Like when you look at the entire Apple keynote, that was all shot on a phone. So, I mean, we have to remember that that's a pretty big thing. But yeah, we get it. So when we're doing promotional stuff, we're getting a lot of stuff from an iPhone, and it's being specifically outlined as, like, I see the specs go by. So this will be a movie company who wants, what we're getting is stuff like, we want we want these two actors to say, hey, we can't be here, but we're really happy to blah, 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 blah. And what we're seeing in the spec out that says iPhone 15 or Sony FX9. It's like one of those, like, or FX6 or whatever. But I mean, I literally just saw that a couple weeks ago. Like, it was like, and so they'll consider an iPhone 15 an acceptable delivery format for their PR stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that we're, seeing more often. I was going to show this rig is over the top. I'm going to show you the rig that I built for my phone. And when I'm actually shooting, I take a big chunk of it off, which I'll circle for you. But I wanted to see how far I could go. And I think I've shown this on the show here before. But this is the rig that I built that is like the most absurd rig. I wanted to see how far I could push it here. So, the iPhone's not here right now because I took a picture with it. But anyway, so basically what we have here, these are electrosonic receivers. And those both go into the those are wired into the Mixpre 3. Mixpre 3 goes into a hub that is right on the other side of this right here. I've got a hard drive that goes into the hub. And then this part up here was the experimental part, which actually did work, this is a ambisonic mic. And then what I'm doing is the ambisonic mic's output, it's got a little headphone output, is going into the Mixpre, so I can record those on separate channels. And I was able to successfully deliver those, the mics plus the ambisonic binaural output to the Mixpre 3 and into the Blackmagic camera. I can put a battery in, so the battery also goes into that hub. So now I've got a battery that this rig will last for a very long time. This monitor was put in here so that it could deliver, if I want to do Zoom, I can show the output of the phone into that so that people could see the Zoom folks or whatever on that. But again, in general, the rig this part gets taken out. That's not, so it's really more of this rig here has been the one that I've shot a couple things with so far. Once you build it up, it's fairly compact. It's easy to put together, and with that rig you can shoot all day. I'll change the electrosonic batteries before I change the batteries on, because it's getting the power from that small rig battery, and so it'll power everything all day. For that. And the thing that Mickey had laid out that I haven't done yet is get the inserts for the electrosonics so that battery could theoretically power my receivers as well, and I don't have that in there yet. So
there's just so far you can go, or keep things simple. When I'm shooting with my monopod, it's nothing but a cage on the phone and a solid little hawk lock mount from the phone cage there. That's when I'm shooting MOS. So I'm just looking for visuals from something like I'm in a parade with people in a parade, and I want as little as possible. So a monopod and a phone, that's it. And it produces exceptional, particularly since the computational videography that iPhones allow, when you run into high contrast situations and a whole bunch of things, if you're shooting RAW, you can really generate some very salvageable images that even in difficult situations can look really great for your audience, which is a big deal. We've got some questions coming in, so let's dive into them.
First question of the second hour is from Douglas Carmichael. For iPhone-based production workflows, which camera app have you had the best luck with? I've tried out Kino and Blackmagic Camera.
Alex, start us off.
I'm playing with Kino. It's a simpler interface. So if you're getting started at something, Kino might be the right way to go. The Blackmagic camera has almost, other than spatial, it has everything I want. So it's very hard for me to, so when we're actually shooting content. Now, of course, I always want to mention Shoot by Squares TV is another one that's more of a live camera input it's got telestration and so on and so forth built into it. But as far as going out and capturing footage, the Blackmagic camera has all the features that I'm looking for, except for the spatial records, which I can't imagine won't be there by the fall. I don't have any information, but I just feel like that's such a missing that it seems like it'll get put in. Kino is the other one, and that's made by the same developers as Halide. So folks who really understand the camera. The interface, again, is a little warmer. Keynote is a little warmer and kinder and nicer than the Blackmagic, which has a lot of data. Now, if I'm picking something up to shoot with my kids, I still use the photo app. I just want to pick it up. I don't want to have the wrong settings. I just want to do what I want to do. But as soon as I start shooting something that I think I might care about, I can set it to log 10-bit HQ and record it that way. And usually I'm trying to record to an external drive. I will say that recording to the internal phone is a little bit quirky. It'll do it. It's just that now it's a lot to get it transferred out of your phone. So I have definitely built a pipeline around if I'm going to shoot log HQ, then I'm going to usually have a separate drive that I'm attaching it to.
And I do two things traditionally. I've used the Blackmagic camera app, and I like it a lot. When I have a circumstance where I'm in a fixed position, I rely on that. When I'm not in a fixed position and I'm moving around, I actually use the actual iPhone camera app in HDR mode. It captures a really nice signal that way that I can manipulate in post, and it's really simple, and it's kind of foolproof for me. I'm very interested in the new Final Cut camera app that just was announced 2 weeks ago because it feeds into this new Apple ecosystem process, and I edit with Final Cut, so I'm looking forward to exploring that more. I haven't had a chance to shoot with it yet because it's only 2 weeks old. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the HDR capturing from the phone is that it's a little quirky the way Apple did the HDR. So it's like this HLG with Dolby metadata on top, and it's a little like you're getting yourself into a package that is not as editable as if you just capture log. So what I will say is that I tend to be careful of that one. If I'm going to do it for fun, I love shooting HDR, and you can see it, by the way. You can see when people do HDR in something like TikTok. TikTok supports HDR now, and you'll see it every once in a while. Like it'll be, every hour you might see one image come up, and suddenly it's super bright on your phone, and then the next one is back to being mud. And it's a funny thing to see happen on the app.
For me, I just like the fact that the workflow from the iPhone into Final Cut out to a mapped 16:9 for YouTube or something like that has been smooth and thoughtless. I really like that about it. Alexander Knight, you had some thoughts?
Well, actually, this is a question I wanted to throw to Alex. I mean, Alex, when we start doing HDR again, do I need to start coming on here with my iPhone 15 Pro in log format?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have but it's going to be 4K.
Panelists.
It's going to be 4K 120 spatial HDR. It's the only way to go.
Don't worry about lighting your whole room, please.
Exactly.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. What is most useful about the iPhone action button?
Alexander, you have a thought?
Well, what's most useful is that it now does more than just one thing. It used to be that it would just be the silent button for your phone. Now it can still do that, but you can assign it different buttons. I can have that button call up the camera. I can have actually one of the more useful features is that you can now use Apple shortcuts. So, for example, I've got the ChatGPT app. So now I can create an Apple shortcut, and I can have that button on the phone trigger a conversation with ChatGPT, which is incredibly useful. So there are a lot of possibilities now with that. And I believe iOS 18 is going to even further enhance it.
And Paul, I think part of the reason for that comes out of the DSLR world, where there was always one, maybe two programmable buttons on the DSLRs. And if you had a particular effect that you constantly used, like you wanted to go into back focus or you wanted to do something else technically that you did a lot. You just program that one button for that, and then rather having to dig into menus and things like that, every time you want to use that, you hit that button and you were in that mode. It can be incredibly useful, but it is also very personalized. So, there is no one thing to do with it. That's the purpose of a programmable button, is to set up the thing that will save you the most time and make it easiest for you. Alex?
Turns the lights off in my office.
See, if you want to go into studio mode and you want to program that into your phone,
my watch turns the lights on, and the action on my phone turns it off. I'm leaving now.
There you go. An unlimited possibility. Let's go to the next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks, any tips on using the new Final Cut camera app from Apple?
Alex?
What you can expect is that we'll probably in a couple weeks or months, we'll come back and do another one of these just about the Final Cut camera when we know a little bit more about it. So it's pretty new. I think it's exciting that Apple's going down that path. When I opened it, I didn't feel like there was anything that I knew I was going to use, out of it. The multicam is kind of interesting. I just don't do a lot of multicam with my phone. So I have enough phones stacked up over here. I could probably pull it off, but I need to. So I was like, oh, this is like, it's a project. The problem is that I try to not open up new things when I'm in production right now. We got a production on Sunday, and I've got a bunch of other things I'm working on. So I'm like, don't touch it. So I'm going to hopefully open it next week. I've got a little bit slower time over that time. So we'll see if we can take a look at it.
For me, the architecture they discussed in the keynote was really interesting. I had no idea they were going in this direction, making the iPad Pro and kind of a hub for multicam shooting. And then you can see them building out an infrastructure around that. The ability to turn a new iPhone into a feeder into that multicam hub doesn't just mean they're doing that. They're also having to pioneer some I/O things. I mentioned earlier the fact that this actually sends a proxy as a live stream to the iPad. So it's a reduced data rate signal, so you can do real-time switching and things like that. And then in the background, behind that initial utility feed, it processes the full res and sends that in the background to the iPad for recording. That means we're going to have new capabilities we didn't have for this combination of agile live switching in the field and high quality on the back end. And I think all these changes that they've looked at, the new processors, the building in everything along the whole production ecosystem is allowing this. And I think that's what's exciting to me, is that they're really looking at personal video and low-end corporate video and video for YouTube, influencer video, and these things as a serious business for them. They know that's going to sell a lot of phones, cameras, and iPads, and they are pursuing that aggressively with all the talent that Apple has in-house. Alex?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I think you hit it right on the head, is that Apple, I think, has figured out that no one's pushing their apps, their hardware very hard, except for the creatives. So Apple for a long time, the creators were all that mattered to Apple. And then there was like a 20-year slowdown of like, hey, we've got iPods and then we've got iPhones and all these. But the problem, as you look at the far end of, these iPads now, the new M4 iPads and everything else are so powerful, and almost no apps can take advantage of them except for the creative apps. And so Apple really focusing on giving the creatives the tools that they need is purely a great way to sell more hardware to us, because we're more likely to upgrade every year. We're more likely to buy those new iPads. We're more likely to buy, because I have two Pros in front of me. I don't have the newest one. Why? Because I don't know what I would do with it. I don't know what it would do that mine can't do. Like that's the challenge that Apple has. I've got two M1s of some version, and I just don't know what would I get out of that, right? And so I am thinking about buying an iPad Pro eventually, but I think that I'm more interested in the Pencil, which is why they made a big deal about it. But you can see with the Pencil, with these video apps, et cetera, Apple's looking at the creative class, as a huge thing, and that's good for us. I mean, I think that it's good for Apple, but I think as far as we are a big part of their growth curve, and that means a lot for us in the not too distant future.
You also sparked my thought about it's an end-to-end solution that includes distribution, because now with iCloud and with this new production thing, one of the big turning points in my career allowing me to make more money in a shorter period of time was the ability to take the edited videos that I did, toss them up back then to Vimeo or toss them up to Frame.io, and then link them to Vimeo and make that the content distribution network, communicating with clients, and eventually putting web videos out that were linked through an entire production process where if there was something wrong, if I had a retail client and they changed prices, I could literally on my desktop knock in a new price, hit play, and it would go, or hit, distribute, and it would go out to all those end websites instantly. The power of that as an economic model for driving video that creates economic results in business always just felt like I've been given the keys to the candy store. And if you can implement that kind of thing, you can do a lot for even small and medium-sized businesses in your market, because that's the way people consume things. I'm consuming it now, but the price needs to change. I don't need a week to change that around. I need 5 minutes. That's pretty stunning. Alex?
And I think just watch the space of news gathering with these phones. They've been using the phones for a long time, but being able to, like when you look at the Blackmagic Cloud, the phone being able to deliver to the Blackmagic Cloud, you could have people editing stuff almost immediately as long as they have internet connection or a cellular connection. So there's a lot. I mean, for news gathering, these phones are amazing because I can go to a lot of places I can't open a regular camera. So like they might take your camera away. They're not going to take your phone away. And so you're able to capture a lot of footage without having too much friction, about bringing these phones in. So it's a really big opportunity.
Yeah, if you look at some of the ads for local media people hiring, there's a lot of ads for stringers for websites and things like that where they want local people to be able to cover local events. And with these kind of systems, it's never been easier. Let's go to the next question.
Russell K. in Brooklyn asks, I can't figure out how to use the Blackmagic Camera app and record the files to my CFExpress Type Card in a card reader connected to the iPhone 15 Pro. Am I missing something?
Alexander, do you have a solution for him?
Yeah, so first of all, I haven't tested Express cards, but I do know that it works with external SSD drives. It should work in theory, but you're going to want to refer to Apple's article, and I'll post a link in chat here. But they have specific requirements right down to the file system, down to the type of cable you're using, down to the type of data speed, transmission speeds it supports. So you're going to want to refer to this article. It talks about APFS or exFAT file systems. Password encrypted drives aren't supported, USB 3 cable, 10 gigabits per second, all this kind of stuff. And you can even use the Files app to format the external drive. So refer to this if you haven't looked at it yet, start over and then test it again and maybe let us know how that goes.
Alex?
I would use a hard drive. I can tell you the T5s and things like that work great. And I would not use a CF card.
There you go. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany asks, please explain how to connect a Mixpre 3.2 or 6.2 with a mic as an audio source to an iPhone 15 Pro for video, and how to power both devices with an NPF-style battery. USB hub required.
Alexander Knight. Alex?
Yeah, when you're plugging that many devices in, you're probably going to want to look at a USB-powered hub. And of course, you can also, as far as powering it from a battery, so you're basically looking at building a rig here because you got a lot of the devices and those batteries are big and heavy. So you're going to want something with like a camera cage from Small Rig that has quarter 20 mounts on it. And you could look at something like, now they sell various different types of batteries. This is the newest, most large capacity battery that they now offer, which is 212 watts, and it has a plethora of ports, everything from DTAP to multiple USB-C and multiple Type A ports. So something like that with a powered hub, so you can plug in everything from your class-compliant audio interfaces to external hard drives and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you're building a rig here. Alex
Lindsay.
Yeah, so the one that I got, let me see if I can pull this up here. Sorry, hold on a second. I got the Belkin. This is the 4-port USB. So there are a couple things you want to think about when you're getting this. This is why we want to do the show, was to be able to talk to some of these things. And sorry, I went full screen with my photos, and now I can't get this up. There we go. So this is the one that that I got, and the reason that this one's important is that if you look at this here, the output goes out here, and there's nothing back here and nothing on the sides. When the hubs start having things on the other side, you can't clamp it anywhere. So it turned out this one was the perfect one. And what I did is I ended up using SmallRig has I think they have a battery attachment that it just turns out it clamps onto this really nicely. So I can clamp, you can clamp here and here on either side. But you need to be able to have all your I/O going out front and back. It can't go out multiple sides. So think about that as you buy it. One of these is battery, so that's where the battery goes in, and then you go to the Mixpre, and then I went out to another monitor. There's a bunch of things you can do there. So, but you need to make sure that you have something that you can actually grab onto as you do it. And you absolutely need a hub. And once you start having a hub and a battery, then you need a rig. And so I started because, Tom Ferguson got me kind of getting the SmallRig. Turns out the SmallRig that goes right on the phone that I learned from Tom, that I learned to use from Tom Ferguson, was not a solid solution for me because it was. So I had a bunch of them. I started buying from my phones, and it was good for little things. But you eventually want to connect more than what that little thing will handle, and you don't want to take your phone in and out of it. So I ended up getting the larger, generalized SmallRig rig, which has just a collapsing. I apologize. I thought it was here. It's not. So, but it basically you can stick it inside of that, and so then you have all this rigging outside of it that you can attach stuff to. So again, if you look at what this is the. Let me see if I can pull that back up again. So this is the what I talked about before. So you can see this SmallRig here. This is actually bigger than the phone. So the phone goes into this little clamp here, and so it sits inside of it. And it turns out that's good. One thing you have to be careful of is I had to move this mount all the way over to the far side, so you can unattach it and attach it further over, because you get into this thing where if you have a phone here, remember your lenses are right there, and on the super wide, if you've got stuff sticking out the other side, it gets into the shot. So I had to think about how far the phone has to be all the way this way. And this is why the rig itself needed to be adjustable. This had to be as far over as it could. And then these lenses had to be as far over as they could be put over there. And so it turns out to be, lots of, a lot of little bits to pull that together, but you will need a rig for it. You could probably get away with the one that attaches to the phone, but I would go ahead and get the more generalized one.
And one of the things that I use, you're going to find yourself in DC distribution land. And you know who's really good at that is SoundCart guys. I used to hang out on some of the sound forums, and they're talking all the time about the distribution of DC power around. The solution I typically use, SmallRig has a sled for NP-style batteries, from the small ones all the way up to the NP950s, that has kind of rectified ports on the side and will output the correct power amount. So that's where I've started, and I've always used that when I'm using an iPhone rig. So look at SmallRig, look at Tilta, all the rest of them. You will find battery sleds that are made specifically for adapting the power.
And one of the things I really like about the SmallRig specifically is because they have USB outputs, and I'm using all the power outputs of the SmallRig battery are being used up in my system.
Yeah. It's nice to have more than one power tap. It's very much like the old D-tap systems on bigger cameras, where you could find a port where you could get power off to a light or something else. Yeah. This, at this low voltage world of cell phones, is available out there. So do your research. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Considering the purchase of an iPhone 15 Pro with the typical Apple September phone announcements, do you recommend holding off on purchase just now?
I am. Alexander, let's start with you.
Well, it's only a couple months away, so there would be no reason to buy one now unless you were at the end of a contract and you were leasing a phone, and your phone company is going to say, well, we're going to send you a massive bill for the remainder of the balance of the phone that you gotta or hand in your old ones. So I would say wait if you can, because we're so close.
Alex Lindsay.
Wait. Don't buy a phone. We're talking about it here. We felt like it was important to go ahead and talk about this before we got to the Apple event. But don't buy a new phone right now. If you don't have the iPhone 15, wait until next, because the 16 will be a big jump again.
Yeah, everything I'm reading about the 16, they're changing a bunch of stuff inside of there, and
I think Apple has figured out that we all buy our phones because of the cameras, and Apple has really locked on to that. And so the thing is that what you can expect every year is that camera and the camera system and the record systems are that's probably where almost all the new engineering is going from Apple. 10 years ago, it was 200 engineers were working on the camera. That was it. It's probably much larger now. And so what you can expect is that every year, I'd stop thinking about buying a new phone after about February. You buy it at the beginning so that you can take a full year of it and then go from there.
I think everybody's waiting for the new A-series chips that power these too, because there's a change in the 3-nanometer process, and they're completely refabbing everything. And nobody knows for sure whether those new A-series chips will end up in the next iPhone. But if it does, that's a pretty big leap. It's a whole new fab process. So I wouldn't, unless you're a once-a-year phone changer, you might want to hold off on this one. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, what is the smartest strategy for liquidating iPhone 12 and 14 Pro Maxes and getting iPhone 15 Pro Maxes?
Alex.
Number one is I'd wait until the advantage of liquidating them now is they're worth more now than they will be. So if you can sell them now before the 16, I wouldn't get the 15, but I would sell anything you have. Everything shifts down about $50 to $75 every time a new phone's released. So your golden time right now to get rid of any old phones that you want to get the most out of, and then keep the cash in the bank and get ready for another one.
There you go. I've got a 12 and a 14 as well, and I'm holding off. I didn't want to go to the 15, but I'm definitely hitting the 16. Go to the next question.
Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina asks, can you stream 1080p 60 from the phone and at the same time record to the internal memory in 4K 60? I've tried Blackmagic Camera plus hardwired AirPlay. It gets very laggy, needs the lower resolution. By the way, ProRes LT seems to be faster than H.265.
Alex?
Yeah, it will be. So ProRes LT or ProRes in general takes less CPU power to record and to play back. So if you're doing H.265 or H.264, all of those are a higher CPU draw than using ProRes. So I think that you can do it, but I don't think you can do it necessarily the way you have it here. So what I would do is I think you can record to the camera at 4K 60, but you have to take the tap out as hardware. So not AirPlay, but you can convert your USB-C to HDMI and then HDMI out to whatever you want to stream from. But you can't, I don't think you can use I think it'll be too computationally expensive for you to use the AirPlay as well as the recording 4K 60.
Just so you know, your votes count today because we still got a lot of questions to work through. So every time you vote, it helps us prioritize. Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia asks, can I split the USB-C from my iPhone 15 Pro Max to both video, SSD drive, and audio Mixpre 3?
Alex, you own a Mixpre?
Yes, I did that with with that hub, I'm able to deliver HDMI to the hub I showed earlier, HDMI to a monitor. I'm able to take audio and power the Mixpre 3. I'm also able to record to an SSD drive and then take power. And then you have a power tap. Those are the 4 in and outs that I'm using there.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania asks, smartphones lean much more into computational enhancements to overcome the physical limitations of the sensor size and optics. What can you get away with on a modern phone camera, and what applications will the cold hand of physics disallow?
Slamming physics, but it's important, Alex.
Wifty hair. So I still see it. So when the video tries to do the short depth of field, and my daughter has, lots of curls in her hair and stuff like that. And so if I'm shooting something of her playing a guitar or something like that, and I'm trying to shoot with that kind of short depth of field, I can see it. It's not perfect. So the stills are getting pretty close to, maybe not perfect, but getting pretty close. So I think that, but you're getting away with an enormous amount. It gets better every update. But I think that the short depth of field, it's still going to be better. And then there are a host of things that are just easier to do. If I'm doing a professional shoot and someone gives me budget, I'm not using my phone. Like, just be clear, like, unless they paid me to use my phone, I'm going to immediately switch to a Blackmagic camera, a Sony camera, or an Arri camera. You know, like if I'm getting, depending on what I'm trying to execute, because especially in a multicam environment, there's a lot of shading and all kinds of other things that you want to do that in a live multicam environment that I'm not going to be able to do with the phone. So I think I don't want to oversell. We want people to be excited about the phone or have people get excited and understand what's possible. We don't want to oversell it. It's not the replacement for these high-end cameras when you're actually doing, certain kinds of work. But there's an enormous amount of power in it right now.
Yeah, having come out of big cameras, the I/O is the single biggest stopper for me. One port on a camera, even with near field communication and other things, getting signals in and out of it, it's just not the same as a full-sized rig. And particularly if you're working on a crew, it is much more difficult for specialists to get in and out of an iPhone than it is a serious camera rig. All that said, what these do when they're in their lane is nothing short of amazing to me. So the quality, the ability to get a quick project done without having a lot of overhead, just amazing. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada asks, what's the best way to capture a spatial still on iPhone 15? The camera app doesn't seem to be able to.
Alex, have you played with stills?
Oof.
No.
There's the answer.
No. I don't understand. So anyway, this is one of the problems. Like my hydrogen phone was able to do this, I don't know, 8 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever. It's so frustrating that the phone doesn't do it, because I so want my ViewMaster back. I so want to be able to deliver stills to people, that are there, and it's so frustrating. So hopefully we're going to see that in some update over the next year. I can't believe they're not doing that. I think it's because it's such low resolution right now. To fix a bunch of things, because they're doing all this computational photography, they're doing a bunch of stuff to the 1080 frames, and I think that it's 1080. But I think that I'm going to guess that when the 16 comes out, the 16 is going to allow us to do 4K stereo stills, because it just seems like such an obvious thing to have there, and it's so frustrating that it's not there.
Next question.
Rajan Chandil in Los Angeles, California asks, do YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram content creators use iPhone 15 for most of their on-the-move creation?
Alex, what have you experienced?
My experience is the vast majority are using, if they're not using higher-end cameras, so if they're using a cell phone, the vast majority are using iPhones. They're just, that's, and a huge, it's a huge percentage. I would say of all the people that I've seen working with them, it's 90-95%. The only people that we see usually that are using the Android phones are the ones that are getting paid to do that. so they're being given phones, they're being handed, doing a bunch of other options there. So when you see the behind the scenes of them using an Android, a Samsung phone or something else, it's usually a part of a sponsorship package. Whether they're following the FTC rules or not, I don't know, but they're typically getting, and oftentimes the ones I've worked with, a couple of them that are using it for the behind the scenes, but the phone that's shooting the behind the scenes is an iPhone. It's hard, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that the file formats that the Android phones are saving in are very non-conform. So they're not great formats, and so they have to find the Android has to find their way to normal production formats before they're going to get a wider use.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, what are the best YouTube channels to learn about the iPhone 15 Pro Max for production? Example, Flossy Carter, Marques Brownless, Mrwhosetheboss, TechBurner, SarahGrace get the most hits.
Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, those are great. I don't know. It's something that a bunch of us have talked about wanting to do some more things, and you may see us talk about it more as we go through it. That may become a shelf in what we're doing in office hours. We'll see how that goes. But those are all great sites. I have to admit, I don't watch a lot of tech sites as much as I probably should, because I get frustrated when I watch them, because I'm just like, oh, it's not really So I tend not to watch a lot of production sites.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Bill, you mentioned using the iPhone 15 for live switch productions. Wouldn't video over Wi-Fi be too high latency for live switch workflows? I know it's being mentioned here that IMAG with too high latency is distracting to the audience.
Yeah, and I just mentioned that in reading through the specs of this, that's one of the things that Apple was serious about in looking at this new iPad Pro, iPhones, feeding it in a live multicam environment. They engineered so that the stream coming back to the iPad is a proxy stream, not trying to send full resolution, so that it can be very quick and responsive. And then in the background, there's a parallel distribution system between the iPhones and the iPad. When it has processor cycles, it processes and sends the full res so that it eventually ends up in your iPad, but it's not what it's recording to do the live switching things. I think that was a smart thing. It's using proxy for what proxy was designed for. Alex, you had thoughts?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I think Apple's really maximized how to make that actually work.
Yeah, they knew this was going to be an issue, and you can imagine their test labs. How do we get these signals back in complete, as close to real time as is humanly possible, so that people can make switching decisions effectively on this? And I don't think you can get it into the iPad and immediately send out live that way. Maybe you can using those proxies if the proxy environment is good enough to do live broadcast, but it doesn't take too much time at these higher data rates for you to get something that is a finished product and produce it. I haven't used that system myself. I just think they were really smart about designing it that way. And I would guess that you can probably do that proxy workflow, but maybe your final thing just sucks in and gets better in time after it's been up for a little bit on the web. That's been my experience with some of the proxy stuff I've done. I shoot it, it looks okay on the web, pretty decent, and then suddenly I come back to it and it looks, wow, that looks really good. Why? The final file got there. Next question.
Rob Collins in Kansas City, Missouri asks, how good is the onboard microphone on the iPhone? Can it handle difficult environments like wind, or is it only fine for backup?
Alex?
It's fine. Backup was only, I wouldn't, there's whether you're using a DJI or whether I'm using electrosonics, whatever you're doing, try to get an external mic in there and try to figure out some way you're going to do it. Try to do a two system record, so you're recording the audio separately. Do something like that. If you really care about the content, get an external mic for it. It'll capture some okay stuff, but it's not going to be great.
Yeah, they've done a lot of engineering for the microphones on phones, but you can't beat physics. That was mentioned before. So, yeah. Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia asks, is there a downside to shooting ProRes LT and then using compressor to ProRes 422 or higher?
Alex?
There's no real reason to go from ProRes LT to a higher format unless you do something like LT 4K and you're going to go down to 1080p and then edit it or something like that. You've already lost the data. So, putting it into a larger box is generally not going to make any difference. I mean, maybe if you do some effects to it or something else, but so basically the downside is that it's a more compressed format. And so you're not going to have as much color data. You're going to have, if you start to push it hard, you're going to start to see it. You're going to see contrasty breakup and so on and so forth. There's just not as much data there. Technically, it can do 10-bit. But we wouldn't consider it. I wouldn't consider anything under HQ a true 10-bit format. So that's I have to admit I capture everything on my phone at HQ.
Yeah, transcoding could be an issue in there. I sometimes have to do it if I know my delivery format is, but I'm never expecting it to get significantly better from whatever the original format was. So shoot as high as you can. It's better to lose resolution and not need it than to not have it and have to computationally try to recreate it.
And that's where having an external drive works great. It's just push it out to the external drive and record in a good format.
Absolutely. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks, what quality do you lose if you convert a compressed acquisition format to ProRes before editing? What do you lose if you don't? What if there is a 10-bit compressed in-camera good-looking format in the future?
Alex, we were just talking
You
about
can,
that.
HEVC would let you do that. So you could record in 10-bit there, but here's the thing: it's going to be overcompressed. When you can't throw data to nothing. So if you start throwing a lot of data away, eventually things are going to break up. What it really costs you is the ability to do color correction. So you can't really push it one way or the other. The other issue is that a lot of the frame rates aren't correct. So most of these other phones are recording in 30p or 25p. They're not recording in 2997 or 2398 or 5994. And so those formats become important to us as we're starting to record those things. And so I think that, but when you take a compression and put it into a bigger format, the advantage that you get is that it's more editable. So the keyframing and everything else, I convert everything. If you send me an MP4, I'm going to convert it to ProRes pretty quickly so that I don't have to deal with it later. Like I just wanted to, it's easy for me to throw something in overnight and then come back the next day and have it there. So that's, and start editing it. So it's all going to be smoother that way.
Yeah, temporal compression is funny because if you have 15 frames captured and you want to do a 30-frame output, all it's going to do is run each of the original frames twice. It's not going to really make any temporal differences between those two because that requires too much effort. There may be specialized systems that do that, but most of us don't have access to them. So shoot with the most resolution and the most temporal and compression resolution you can, and then it's always easier to go down. You get better results going down than going up. Next question.
Next question is from me. As many people on the panel are experienced production people, what would you like to see from an updated iPhone 16 Pro camera lens array?
Ooh, lens arrays. Alex.
Well, I would love to see them spread the lenses apart. I know this won't happen, but if they could get closer to interaxial, the spatial will look better. I would love to see higher frame rates at 4K, so going to 120 at 4K all the time. I'd love for the depth cameras to work even better than they do now. I'd love for more. You can't get enough low light, there. And I would love for you to be able to lock it to 48 and really have it stick to 48. Sometimes we have it jumping automatically to another format. If I want the 48, I want the 48, and I just want to hit lock and not have it ever do anything other than a 48 image still, 48 megapixels still.
For me, the one thing that I still think I have a little bit of trouble with is when I'm doing a pinch zoom and it switches from one camera to another, there's usually something that I can tell it switched those things. It's gotten way better. It used to be there was a significant jump when it went from lens A to lens B. Now I'm seeing less of that, but it's still not a completely smooth experience for me. So I'm hoping that longer zoom throws continue to get better. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania asks, what use cases will take advantage of an encoder hardware and software that can run on a phone? What limitations might call for a dedicated encoder?
Alex.
The advantage of the phone is stuff like spatial streaming because I can't, and just the convenience of it. But spatial streaming, I can't. There's no way to do that right now other than stream straight from the phone. So we just give it a connection and go from there. So that's one advantage of the spatial streaming. Spatial streaming would be something to do on the phone. It's convenient. You can pull it out and stream. So that's another advantage. But a lot of times, if you want to build it into a larger multicam system, if you want to have better transport systems, if you want to have higher quality encoding, all of that stuff will require an external encoder.
And I will say, Alex made the point earlier that Apple understands and partially owns ProRes and the rest and some of these other formats. When they have to shoot in something else or transcode it, they may or may not have a license to put that on the phone and have the incredible power of these new Apple silicon chips do that. So just pay attention to what you're shooting in. Next question.
Jonathan Michelson from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Do you know how Elgato's EpocCam Iphone webcam app manages to crop losslessly from the full frame? I assume it is pulling 4K for zoom, X1, and transcoding to 1080p for zooming in, but does it seamlessly with 60 FPS and no subscription, the best of kind?
Alex.
I don't know. So we have to. I don't use it, so we'll have to play with it a little bit to see what it's doing. It's probably just subsampling the sensor, so it wouldn't be very hard for it to do it.
Let's see if we can get another one before the top finish.
Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia. Is there a way to lock focus on a moving subject via the iPhone?
It has tracking.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it has tracking. We should finish these questions, by the way. It's our fault.
Okay, we'll keep going.
You should be able to lock it. There's a locking feature in it where it'll track that person. that's in the. But as far as I know, it's only in the Apple iPhone app.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. How would you rate the telecom carriers? Example, AT&T, Spectrum, T-Mobile for iPhones.
Oh, where do you live? What's the landscape around you for wireless things? There's so many issues here. Alex, what's been your expectation?
Verizon where it works, and AT&T everywhere else. Everything else is trash in the United States. I mean, it's just like I have all of those cell carriers on my like live view and stuff like that. I can just see what they're doing. The AT&T ones work generally most places, but not quite as fast as Verizon. Verizon is the fastest when it's working, and everything else is it's so hot, hit and miss. It's not worth using.
I will say I've had a very good experience here in Southern California in the San Diego area with Spectrum. I was surprised because I had dropouts with AT&T and other places. But, where are you? What kind of connectivity do you have? There are just so many variables in this. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would it be advisable to turn off auto lock when using the iPhone for production?
Alex?
Never. Yeah, set it to never all the time. Like now you have to remember that you set it to never, and you'll run the battery out if you set it down on a table while you're working on something else. But you should that's absolutely turn auto lock off when you're doing production. Absolutely.
Next question.
Ross Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia. Last question, is there a way to combine my Ninja V and the iPhone Pro Max? That's the Atomus recorder, I believe.
Alex, have you fed?
Yep, you can take the HDMI out from the iPhone and put it into the Ninja, and you'll get a feed in that external. And you could record to that external as well, because it's just an HDMI feed out of the phone.
That was Roz's last question. There's one more from Jonathan.
Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina, asking, is it possible to make Zoom use AirPods and a Rode wireless USB-C mic at the same time?
Alex?
I don't think you can do both at the same time. So you'll need to pick those. I think someone did come out with some kind of audio routing for the phone. I remember us talking about that at some point in the last couple of years, but I haven't used it. So there is an iOS routing software, but I don't remember what it was.
Alexander?
Yeah, I don't think he specified whether it was phone or not, but yeah, you're right. iPhone, you can't really do that, but on the desktop, that's easy enough because in the audio settings, you've got one setting for microphone, you got one setting for speaker output, so you'd set your speaker output to your Bluetooth AirPods, and then the mic would be the Rode.
There you go. Thank you for watching today. As always, our huge thanks to all of you who added questions to this, your producers. Without you, this show does not happen every day, and it certainly isn't the same show. So thank you for taking the time to put your questions in. To the panelists, everybody who's been here over the course of this hour, and everybody who's been here this week, this month, and this year for making the show what it is. We appreciate all the panelists who freely show up and give their expertise every day. And to our amazing back-end crew. Those people who are quiet, who you will see their names on this rolling credit list that's going to come up, and please pay attention occasionally to who they are and what they're doing because they are amazing. And none of this would happen without this small global village. Not small, it's geographically gigantic, and there are far more people than you think who are responsible for making this happen every day, and we thank each and every one of them. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
No, I'm going to go shoot some footage with my iPhone.
Right. Production time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good.
He lives it and he breathes it every day.
I was surprised. That was a lot of questions, obviously.
Yeah. Anything for us, I don't want to do it too often, but for us, doing Apple shows is easy because we have a lot of Apple listeners. So it's alwait's like an easy, let's throw something that's Apple based in there because we know that we'll have a lot of people viewing, a lot of people interested. So it's always an easy.
You're looking for the stats.
Easy throw. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks everybody.